Welcome to Detroit Opera's OperaHere podcast. This is Arthur White coming to you from the Detroit Opera House. And joining me today is Nathalie Doucet, the head of music and the director of the Detroit Opera Resident Artist Program. Nathalie, thank you so much for being here once again.
Arthur, it's so fun to be with you on these podcasts and to do all of our pre-performance talks. We spend so much time together. And to all our listeners, we are thrilled you have joined us today as we take a look at Paul Rutter's opera, The Handmaid's Tale. This production marks the first time Detroit Opera has mounted this work in our 54-year history. And today, we will speak a bit more about the opera, its composer, as well as Margaret Atwood, who gave us this original story. Canadian author, by the way. Then we will welcome two special guests who are intimately involved in bringing this opera to our stage. Rutter's opera, The Handmaid's Tale, opens March 1st and runs through March 7th at the Detroit Opera House.
The opera, The Handmaid's Tale, was penned by Danish composer Paul Rutter, who has distinguished himself in the musical world, having composed 5 operas, 5 symphonies, 4 string quartets, as well as piano sonatas and concertos. He and librettist Paul Bentley set The Handmaid's Tale to music, premiering their opera in Copenhagen in the year 2000. The opera was well received at the premiere and has since been performed in London, Toronto, Banff, English National Opera, Minnesota Opera, and the San Francisco Opera.
The work is based off the story by author Margaret Atwood in her critically acclaimed 1985 novel, The Handmaid's Tale, which I devoured. A futuristic dystopian tale of America in the year 2195, where the United States government has been overthrown and the country is now ruled under a theocracy known as Gilead. The new regime has reorganized society in a peculiar interpretation of the Old Testament, where women's rights are relegated to the lowest rank in society. Women are not allowed to read, they're not allowed to vote, they can't own property, and have no rights over their names or their reproduction.
Now, in the story, we meet Fred. Under the new regime, she is considered an adulterer because she was married to Luke, a divorced man. Now, under Gilead, the new regime, her marriage is now dissolved and her daughter is taken away from her. Because she is young and fertile, she is forced to be a handmaid who wears all red with a white bonnet, and she is assigned to produce children for the commander and his wife. Her days are filled with harrowing experiences of constant religious indoctrination, forced copulation with the commander, and the constant reminder of death to anyone who opposes authority. Can she escape from this madness and be reunited with her husband and her child? So, Nathalie, as I think you had mentioned earlier, you had read this book. Was that some time ago, or was it a couple of years ago? Or
I read it several times. Actually, I've been back and forth through it, and also the second book in this series that Margaret Atwood wrote, The Testaments, is also a very, very interesting read, and it follows the story after they leave Gilead. And I've watched the series. I've seen the movie. There are so many things and resources out there to know about this story. It's very dark, but it's kind of like a cautionary tale of like, we're not careful, you never know what can happen. And I would hate for this to be a real story, of course, but I think it pushes us to think about things in a different way. And I'm a big fan of Margaret Atwood. She's a Canadian author. I've known of her since I was a child and read several books. So I'm really excited to bring this story to life on our Detroit Opera House stage.
Yeah, I first became aware of the piece through the series, not the book, but the series. And when I saw it a few years back, it just seemed a little too far out. But it's funny, as time is going on, I'm starting to feel that thin line between, democracy and something else maybe isn't as thin as I thought it was, especially where information all of a sudden is now being weaponized. We're getting all different types, particularly in our society today with social media and other things. Everyone's getting different sorts of information. And so a way to be manipulated and to be, thinking one way or having a particular perspective is a little scary. You kind of see that, obviously, everyone's constantly through this opera and through this story is being manipulated one way or another,
Well, I think that's what art does best. It propels us into discussion and it makes us think about things. And sometimes we go to the theater to escape the everyday life. And sometimes we go to the theater, to the opera to be provoked by what we see on stage. And I think in this case and in this time, this is a piece of art that will provoke us to think in a very different way about how things are going. And I think what's really remarkable is the interest that people have in this story. And we were just talking the other day in the Opera House about, we put out a notice for extras to be on our stage, and about 900 people have applied to be an extra in this opera. So people are really interested in this story. They want to be part of it. It's something that people are kind of excited about, and they want to be a part of what we're trying to communicate with the audience. And it's a very popular series as well, which it helps a lot. So that's very remarkable that we don't always get that kind of response for calls for supers. So we'll see who gets the jobs. But yeah, it's exciting.
You are so correct. Both of us are tasked with often taking either singers out or going into the community to talk about the things that are happening, the great things that are happening at the Detroit Opera House. And so as I've been out talking these last weeks about this production, people know this story. Maybe folks who've never even stepped through our doors at the Opera House are now saying, hey, let me come take a look. I know this story and I want to see it put on stage because it has a resonance with me, either what's going on today or whatever. So it's very exciting. So I can't tell you, I can't wait for this production.
What's really interesting is that we have a fully female creative team on this opera, and particularly Brenna Corner, who we will speak to later,
Yes.
who is the stage director for this opera, and Marit Strintlund, who is she is Swedish and she is a conductor, and she's making her Detroit Opera, but not only Detroit Opera, North American debut. She conducts a lot in Europe, and one of her specialties is really contemporary music. So I know she will bring a lot of insight to this piece, which I'm excited to learn from her.
Can I ask you this question? Put you on the spot a little bit here, Nathalie. You have been, of course, you joined the team, the artistic team, I believe it was right after the pandemic.
2021.
And there have been several productions where we have had an all-female creative team, something that has not historically been the opera world. It's been pretty male dominated in all of the, whether it's we're talking about conductor or director or designers and all that. And so what is it like to be a part of a team where it is an all-female team who could bring sort of, maybe is it a new perspective or is it a different perspective, would you say, to some of these works?
It's very interesting because when we did Breaking the Waves a couple of years back, we were a fully female team as well. And I think with sensitive subjects like this that have to do with women's rights or reproductive rights or something very sensitive that has sensitive kind of stage business, it's kind of nice to have the woman's touch in the room. Although I think a man could do it just as well. It just so happens that we have an all-female team. And I think one of the things that Roberto Kalb, our music director, does very well is he really looks for the best possible conductors that he can find if he's not in the pit. We always love having him here, but if he's not here, he's always looking for the best possible conductors to do, and that fits with the piece as well. So Marit, having so much experience in Europe with contemporary music, I think was a perfect kind of fit for this piece. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what she does with the music and having her in the house.
What can you tell us about some of the cast members? I believe that some of your resident artists are also taking prominent roles in this opera.
Absolutely. We have an amazing cast with Nemo Sullivan, Davia Boulay, Alexandra Lobianco, returning resident artist Lisa Marie Rogali, who was in our 23-24 season resident artist. She's coming and she's going to be playing the role of Offred in the time before. So when we have flashbacks, she will be the Offred that is not in Gilead, but the one that's married and has her child. And our current resident artist, Travis Williams, will be playing the role of Luke, the husband, and Brianna Robinson will be playing the role of Moira, who is Offred's friend. And I'm very proud of all of them for being part of this production. One of the things we really like to do is bring back our resident artists when we can, when we have roles. So having Lisa Marie Rogali back in the house is going to be amazing. And also just to note that last year's Despira in our Così fan tutte and Tumi is coming back as of Glenn. So we have an amazing cast on this stage, really well assembled by Roberto Calb. So I'm really excited to welcome them all in the house in a couple of weeks.
Fantastic. I'm particularly excited that Lisa Marie is back. I didn't mention this in our lead-in. We talked about women losing their autonomy, even their own name. And of course, of Fred is because our protagonist is sort of assigned to Fred, the commander.
Exactly.
So he's of Fred. And so I guess we didn't really talk about that. Just talk about how totally everything has been stripped away. All rights,
everything
of all kinds is taken away in production.
As property of Fred, right? So
yes.
Her real name is June in the book, so that she's the property of Fred and the property of Warren of Glenn. So that's how they name these women in Gilead in this dystopian future, which we hope will never happen.
That's right. Well, this might be a good time to bring in our first guest, the director of this production.
Well, I'm so excited because our guest is an international opera and theater stage director working across the United States, Canada, and Europe. She's also the artistic director of Pacific Opera Victoria in British Columbia, Canada. She has directed for the Washington National Opera, Glimmerglass Festival, Vancouver Opera, Seattle Opera, the Israeli Opera, Houston Grand Opera, Cincinnati Opera, and so many more. During the COVID-19 pandemic, she created a new opera experiences through film, including Don Giovanni for Seattle Opera, Carmen Up Close and Personal for Vancouver Opera, Dear Mom, a web series for Kentucky Opera, and Green Envelopes for Manitoba Underground Opera, of which she was the founding artistic director. Please welcome Brenna Corner.
Hi.
Hi. Thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here.
This is so exciting. Thank you. I just wanted to maybe start off. I know that, of course, you directed this opera in Banff last year, and I'm just wondering, what was your first experience with this story?
Well, I mean, I definitely read the book when I was younger, and so that was, of course, my first introduction to the piece. I recently read her new sequel, I guess it is. And read is maybe not the right word. I think I devoured it. And so that was great. And then, of course, I did watch the television series, although I have to admit, I only got a couple of seasons through because it was just, I mean, the content of the story is a lot. And seeing it in television in full scale was a little much for my heart. So I only lasted about a season and a half through that, I have to admit. But yeah, that's my sort of knowledge and awareness of sort of the zeitgeist of Handmaid's Tale.
For those of us who have also I've read the books, The Testaments, and The Handmaid's Tale, and those that have watched this series, we know that throughout the story, Offred has flashbacks. So throughout the opera, there's also flashbacks of her previous life before Gilead. How do you approach giving the audience understanding of the backstory while also showing the relived trauma of these fragmented memories?
Well, part of that is inherent to the piece. So it's not actually something that I have to do. I mean, the composer wrote it in, those scenes happen. The bigger thing for me was about how do we create a structure, an overall sort of envelope that all of that stuff can live in, especially because in opera, I mean, we have some incredible abilities in opera. We do emotional connection and like rip your soul out better than any other art form because I think of the music. But what we are maybe not as fabulous as, we can't put an entire city on TV like they can in movies, right? We can't hear every thought that a character thinks like you can in a book. So it ends up being a little different about how you present it because the mediums are a little different. So what we ended up deciding on is that we really wanted to make sure that we always felt like we were in her memory, her version, her existence of the story. So the production itself, and I know it sounds a little bleak as I explain it, but the production itself lives in sort of this world of darkness and abyss, and all of the memories come from it, even the memories that are current, that are in Gilead, as well as the flashback memories, because we wanted the ending of the piece to be something that she chooses. So the production for me is actually really an exploration on how we exist in trauma, how we relive it, how we deal with it, and how we forgive ourselves and step forward from that. Because I think in some ways, that is actually something that is very inherent in the piece, whether you set the piece in the movie world where everything's happening, or it is all a memory. We are watching this woman deal with an extraordinary amount of change and trauma and coming to grips with who that makes her and how you then move forward from that.
Got you. Brenna, I sat yesterday and I just read only the libretto. And I realized there really isn't a lot of text always happening, always a lot of words. And I was wondering, how did you approach the complex sort of nonverbal power struggle between Alfred, Serena Joy, and the commander?
Again, it's opera. I don't have to do it because he put it in the music. When I first was telling my husband about this piece, I said, it's the music is the world. The music creates that sort of dystopian tension, that disquiet, I'm not sure this is a word, but uncomfortability of what the character is dealing with. And the stakes of that, he put it in the music. So for me, my job is actually kind of to get out of the way and to support the artist on stage so that we as an audience really follow her story. And I think it's really tricky because in a piece like this, we want to deal with the macro. We want to deal with the whole overall social, political conversation that is happening. But in this piece, what we are actually following is a mom whose kid has been taken away, who is in this horrific world where she is being forcibly raped and trying to deal with how she survives. And what does that make her if she does survive? Does that still make her a mom? Does her all of those questions? And for me, when we highlight her and really highlight her struggle, her journey, her kind of process of existence, that is how we actually understand the macro. Well, that's how we really understand the stakes of the political world that is happening in this dystopian world. But part of that also all relies on the music. So for me, it's a lot about we wanted to create a world where we allowed the artists the space to go on that journey and that we allow enough space for us as an audience to take what we need to take from that story.
So just like you, I watched the series. It was very hard to get through the series because it is quite jarring and it can be dark and it's got a lot of subject matter that can be very difficult for somebody watching. And just like the story, there are scenes that involve what they call this salvaging and public executions. So how do you balance the need for the visceral impact with the sensitivity required for these scenes to the modern audience of today? Like how are we looking at treating this during the opera?
I mean, there's no question that some of the more disquieting elements have to exist on stage. They are written into the opera and they are very important because they again help us underline her struggle, which then allows us to understand that macro sort of balance that I was talking about a second ago. But I think when it comes to how we approach it for an audience, I have to be honest, part of that, again, I know I keep sounding like a bit like a broken record, but part of it is about the music. The music, like auditorily, when you listen to it, it is not Puccini. Do you know what I mean? Like, it is not Puccini. It doesn't sound like that. It doesn't have that sort of peace or joy that sort of vibrates into your chest, even when Mimi is dying and he's screaming her name. You still have this power love thing that it's in your chest. This doesn't feel that way. It's more like it like actually exists in your skin. It like buzzes your body in a different way. And so part of that is I think so what the audience experiences from the piece is already different. So for me, when we approached how we wanted to put some of these scenes on stage, it was actually really important to me that we don't try to put physical representations of all of this stuff on stage. Because what we don't want to do is alienate an audience. right? It's a bit like Alfred Hitchcock, right? The best scary stuff is the stuff you don't see, because our imaginations will do a lot of that. So when it comes to scenes like the salvaging center, a lot of that stuff we don't really see. We see in shadow, or we see the beginning or the end of. We don't see the hangings, we see the bodies. Because for me, actually, that's actually more powerful, and it forces an audience to participate in a different way. When you watch the whole action, you're receiving all of the story. But when you only watch part of it, you actually have to invest in believing. And that sense of belief really actually keeps engaging you in the process of the storytelling.
It's also that these acts are really part of the journey that the characters have to go through. Like, they have to do these unimaginable things just to survive. So I think these are really important things to note as we look at this opera, and why things are in the story is really the journey of the character, right? That goes through it.
Well, and it's also, again, that's also for me why it's not important that we necessarily put all of it viscerally on stage. One of the things, when you think about any traumatic moment that you may have had in your life, the way we remember it is different. We don't remember it with the clarity that we maybe have other memories. The big moment is super clear, but everything else is fuzzy on the edges. And that is actually how that works. And for me, there's very little part of this story that would not create traumatic memories. So what we are truly watching is her memory of these events, which also allows us a little bit of artistic gray edges, so that, again, we don't have to ask an audience to watch hangings. We can do that. We can live that. We can still feel that sort of need to throw up when you watch it, but not put it on stage, or put it on stage in a different way.
But is there a scene though where the handmaids do they bring in, I believe, an accused rapist, and don't the handmaids at one point all sort of start to kick and sort of abuse him? I don't know if the intent is to kill him or just to teach him a lesson or something.
Well, I mean, the sort of intent is, for what it is stated, is that, you have between the whistle to basically take revenge on this rapist, who we also learn in the piece is not a rape. We learn from Uvglen is actually not a rapist and is part of the underground movement. But so they're never like told to kill him. I mean, they do, but they are never explicitly told that, because, again, there's something powerful about the idea of choice, right? And that sort of idea of group choice. And that's really highlighted in that piece. Because for me, the point of that moment in the show is not that a bunch of women beat a man to death. That's not the function. The function of that is to remind us that, these women were pretended to be given a choice to do this horrific act. And also, the important thing that is, of Glenn and of Fred have a scene that's sort of taking place at the same time, in that, where they're having a conversation about the fact that of Glenn kicked him unconscious at the beginning of it so he wouldn't feel anything, because she is also part of the resistance movement. So, again, the function of that horrific moment in the story is not the horrific moment. The function is for us to actually understand that it's about human kindness, which is like so weird and ironic, that this horrible, horrible thing, but it's actually, well, for us to understand that what of Glenn did in that moment is actually a very, very twisted, but in this world, the only way that you can sort of have love or kindness.
Yeah, so or only mercy. Act of kindness. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and mercy. We talked about the first time you had. I never read the book. I happened to stumble onto the series on television. And I just remember thinking, you talked about earlier, Brenna, about just how heavy it was. I just remember thinking just how heavy the whole thing is the whole time. Do you ever find any sort of dark humor in this story, or some of the absurdity of some of these rules, or is it all just pretty much just a heavy experience?
I think, in the rehearsal room, we generally find quite a lot of comedy, because you have to. If you're spending, 6, 12, 8 hours working in this sort of world as a group of people who, maybe we've met each other before, maybe we haven't met each other as artists, you need to find some joy. And actually, when when we worked on it in Banff, that was the one thing I kept telling the cast was like, you guys need to make sure you're finding joy in other places, because this piece demands so much of yourself as an artist that you gotta go refill somewhere else. And while we, like we found moments of joy in her connections with people, in the memory of her kid, in a lot of the flashbacks about her husband, there's moments of joy. And there's even a couple moments of comedy. There's a great little scene where they're singing about of Fred's past called The Double, and her husband are singing for their little girl, and they're saying, we're going to find you, we're going to get you, and we had the little girl giggle throughout the whole thing because they're looking for, of course they know where she is. It's hide and go seek with a 4-year-old. Oftentimes they think they're hiding very well, and maybe they're not as successful at it as they giggle around. So there are moments of release, and there are moments of like scaling emotional impact. But it very much is in the music that you are sort of consistently invoking this dystopian world that, again, musically lives just under your skin. So there's never really the release, if anything, I would say is a very sort of cerebral release. It's not really an emotional release, if that makes any sense.
Total sense. And I think also having done more serious pieces and darker pieces in the past, that moment of levity in the rehearsal room is so important. And the fact that we can just kind of let go and kind of shake it off and then go back to work is the best way to go about it. And it's great that you're going to implement that. And I'm personally very happy that you will be very much implementing that in the rehearsal room. I wanted to talk about the production and the costume design. We all know the iconic red handmaid's dress with the white bonnet and the wives' blue uniforms. How did you collaborate with your designers to make the world of Gilead in this opera feel distinct from that which we have seen on the series or on movie adaptations?
I think for us, the thing that was the most important that it stayed sort of true to our iconic imagery was the costumes. That the costumes feel like the things we associate with Gilead. So yeah, you've got red capes, you've got the red dress, you've got, as you said, the wives in blue. Of course, one of the trickiest things we dealt with were the handmade bonnets. One of the things that I felt really, really strongly about is that I wanted a design of those sort of headpieces or bonnets, similar to what they had in the television show, and not similar to other operatic productions I have seen. Only because for me, the thing that is very important about that style of bonnet that encloses is it's like horse blinders. You can't see out the side, and the idea of capes that constrict how you can reach for things. The idea of a bonnet that is forcing you to only be able to look sort of down and forward. I think that those are two very, very important aspects to the creation of how we wanted these women to feel controlled. So the wives in our version, we're not dealing with capes. We're dealing with a variety of different sort of blue, for lack of a better word, sort of, pantsuits, but they're, of course, no one's in pants, but, dresses or a blazer and a skirt. And, so it's a clean line. It's elegant. They are still in skirts. So there is some sense of confinement, a lack of mobility, but not to the same degree that the handmaids are, where they're hampered by long dresses with no shape, capes that again sort of come around the front and stop your ability to really use your arms in an effective way. And of course, these the best way I have to think of them is really like horse blinders, where you cannot see. Your peripheral vision is beyond useless. So all you can do is turn your head. That to me was really important for us as an audience, that we see the degrees of control. And it was also important because it changes how the performers move when you can't when you can't see like that. Now, obviously, we had to create a version where the singers would be able to see, and of course, where the sound would not be impacted by these sort of hood things. So we worked with a lot of different meshes and styles to kind of get the sense of that. So actually, while from the audience they look like they're very solid, actually they're quite porous, and
That's
you
great.
can see through them and you can sing through them.
Or more importantly, see the conductor, because the music is kind of hard. So
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Brenna, I loved how you spoke earlier about how the music really was helping to drive a lot of the things that you were doing or trying to do. There are a couple of familiar tunes, Amazing Grace and a Bach piece that might be familiar to folks, but they're sort of performed in this distorted sort of way. How did you think about when those tunes sort of came up, what you were doing staging wise, or what you were trying to bring out of those scenes where Amazing Grace, for example, appears, which is 2 or 3 times, I believe it is.
I think part of it was that we wanted to again, like, let the music do the emotional work. Like, it's a very strange thing to hear Amazing Grace and hear it in exactly like, it is Amazing Grace. There's really but all of the other instruments are like, they're all playing the wrong notes.
yeah.
It all feels not right, but yet Amazing Grace is right. And so part of it was actually to kind of lean into that, which is so, like, for example, in the Amazing Grace scene, it is a flashback. So the idea was, okay, well, then we just need to let it happen. We need to let the audience, that uncomfortability that happens in that music because of the sort of dissonance between those two musical ideas, just let the audience be affected by that and put as much normal as we can on stage. So that because for me, what those scenes are is often it's like what's the right word? It's like a premonition or a prelude, right? You can feel that the macro world is starting to kind of go crazy, but there's still this element of normal in it. And that's a thing when the bigger world is changing around us, uh, it may be happening at such a scale that we don't even understand or know that that's happening. And so we have our lives continue in our normal, and yet things are changing around us that are going to impact us greatly in a couple of years or whatever. And we don't know that. And so for me, that's what those moments are, is they're sort of like, yeah, premonitions or reminders that the outside world is shifting despite the rightness or normalness of that moment or of the internal world. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense.
It did to me. I mean, I think it's
Okay, good.
really interesting to see these traditional elements within the sound world that Paul Ritter's made for us. So I think it's a very interesting thing that happens when these fragments of normalcy come out in the music. So to kind of remind us of something else while we're living in a very different reality. Brenna, in light of the debates regarding women's reproductive rights that are still happening today in 2026, how do you feel the nature of this story shifted since the opera's premiere in 2000, or even when the book came out? Or has it at all?
I have to be honest, I don't know if it actually has shifted, because I think what the piece, what the book, what the story, the television, the opera, whatever, um, what it does is it encourages us to think about it. And yes, it is, like a fantasy dystopian world, but there are elements of the right to choose and who has power over people and their bodies that are, of course, as you said, like, still up for debate today. So I don't know that it has changed at all. I think if anything, it just every time we do this piece, it presses on the conversation more. And at a certain point, that's what we need. What we need is the conversation. We need to talk about it. Even if people disagree about whatever their opinions may be. The only way we will ever move forward is if we're actually talking and having debate and, intelligent conversations that we actually listen to. And so I think that's one of the powerful things about a piece like this. I don't know that the piece, at least for me, I don't know that it has a very specific point of view. I mean, it does have a very specific point of view, but I think it also has the ability to start a conversation. And I think at the heart of art, that's really what we want, is we want people to leave thinking and talking. And even if it's not maybe the opinion that I want people to have, it is way better that at least they're thinking about it than not thinking about it at all.
Exactly.
Got you. Brenna, you, our conductor, Merritt Strindlin, our chorus director, Katherine Kozak, of course, Nathalie Doucet, who's here, our head of music, are all sort of leading creatives on this project. How is this project different now? Because there's such a female perspective, and which you may not necessarily see in other productions.
I think that's a great question. I'm not sure I can actually answer that because all the women that I talk to in the piece are women, so I'm not sure that I totally know. But I can say that it's been pretty exciting. It's been pretty exciting to, even in the design process, all of the designers, all of the creatives are women. We are not all the same, right? Like, we are not all the same women. We all have different opinions and we all have different views. But it has created some really interesting conversations about the piece, particularly when we were originally creating the production, a lot of conversation about what the ending is. We had, with the designers, we had huge, like, hours long conversations about what the ending is, the postlude, and how we wanted to stage that in a way that felt uplifting, that felt moving forward, that felt powerful, but also felt very true to the story. And it was actually a really fascinating thing because every woman in that conversation had a different understanding of what they needed from the piece, what they needed for the piece to have been of value to them as a woman. And I think actually that is the thing that I'm kind of the most excited about. The piece ends, and throughout the piece, the wall that we see appears again. And in the end, she chooses to go to the wall and open the door and step through it, which for us was a really big thing because it became this sort of metaphor about choosing to leave the hauntings of this event, that she would not be defined by the trauma that she had experienced. Instead, she would choose to step forward. And that was something that we all thought actually was really something we wanted to highlight. But it took us hours to get to that point.
Wow. Can I ask you this? What was it like having just done this piece, 7, 8 months ago, coming back to it? Did you have a different view coming back to it again? Was anything changed, or did you find yourself maybe looking at something or focusing on something that you hadn't 7 months ago, but now all of a sudden you're like, we really need to look at this?
Yeah, there's some elements that we definitely, knew we wanted to shift or we wanted to change, we wanted to put more focus on. For me, the thing that is, and it actually just was brought home even more, is the importance of the relationship between her and her daughter. I think that is, for me, the absolute crux of the show, is we are watching a mom whose kid is being taken away and who's forced to, like, become a mom again, except she doesn't get to become a mom. She just has to create a kid. Like, there's so much stuff in that for me, I was like, I want to see the kid more. I want to see her relationship with the kid more, because that, I think, is at the crux of what she is trying to balance, and also trying to forgive herself for. She let her kid get taken away. And, I am not a mom, but I would imagine that if that happened, that would be the hardest thing in the world to forgive yourself for, that you did not fight hard enough to keep your kid. I can't even imagine what the weight of that would be. And I think the loss of a child, whether like just taken away or whether, separated by death or whatever, that is a thing that would fundamentally change you, and you have to deal with in order to move forward. And so for us, that really was the crux of the production. And then as we've been sort of moving towards this new version, I was like, we need more. We need more of the importance of who her kid is.
Well, I'm so excited to embark on this journey with you, Brenna, and with the cast. We have an amazing cast assembled, and I can't wait for everybody to see what Gilead is going to look like on our Detroit Opera stage. And thank you so much for speaking with us today. It's so great.
Thank you. Thank you.
We are thrilled to welcome our next guest, who is the new chorus director for Detroit Opera. She's a pianist, a coach who hails from Ohio. She completed her studies in vocal coaching and accompanying from the University of Illinois, where she was a student of John Wussman. She served also as an associate coach at Juilliard School and a visiting professor at the University of Miami. She has enjoyed affiliations with numerous companies throughout the United States. Her longest-standing relationship is with the Glimmerglass Festival, where she is the current chorus director, and in 2026 will mark her 15th summer season with the Upstate New York Company. She has collaborated with the Dallas Opera, Palm Beach Opera, Florida Grand Opera, Santa Fe, Lyric Opera of Kansas City, Opera Colorado, and Central City Opera, amongst others. She comes to Detroit directly from Arizona Opera, where since 2022 she served as head of music, chorus director, and principal coach of the Pullen Opera Studio. Please welcome Katherine Kozak. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, Arthur. Thanks for having me. It's wonderful to be here with you.
Pleasure to have you.
Kathy, it's so nice to have you, and welcome to Detroit Opera. A little belated welcome since you've been here from September, but we're so happy to have you as our chorus director, guiding our wonderful Detroit Opera chorus to great heights. So
Thank
now
you.
we're preparing The Handmaid's Tale. And in this opera, the chorus often represents the voice of Gilead itself. So how do you help the singers understand and embody that collective identity?
Yeah, so in this opera, the choristers will portray many different people. They'll be portraying handmaids, some of them are portraying aunts, wives, and some of them during the course of the show will actually be changing costumes. And so perhaps they might begin the show as a handmaid, but then as the show evolves, they change costumes and they may appear as an aunt or a wife. And so really, whatever music section I'm working on, I really try to dig into the text and really the very complex and often unsettling harmonies that accompany the text that the chorus is required to sing. In the first chorus rehearsals, which I still am in, I'm focusing mostly on singing this a cappella so they are not, quote unquote, tainted by the strange harmonies that are happening around them. And once they get comfortable with their own parts and their own harmonies, then I will start introducing the atonal nature of the orchestral accompaniment. And so really, to answer your question, a lot of it is based on what they're saying, the context of what they're saying, where they're saying it, and what character they're portraying. It's quite complex.
Isn't it lovely as well that a lot of our chorus members in this particular opera have little solo bit roles, but some of them are pretty substantial, actually.
Yes, a number of our choristers will also fulfill what we call chorus bit roles. And these are roles such as econo wife, widow, man, for example, but also there are other roles with proper names such as Moira's aunt, Warren's wife, New Off Glen.
So, Katherine, I started my career in the chorus. It was always about it's beautiful singing and uniformity. So I'm wondering, how do you balance this sort of beautiful singing and uniformity in the chorus's role as an authoritarian force?
That's a great question, Arthur. And I will share with you that in my very first chorus rehearsal a couple weeks ago, one of the first things I said to the chorus was, no matter what you're singing, I do not ever want you to push your voice past the point of beauty. So even though you may be singing about some difficult things, some harsh things, we don't ever want to sound ugly, if I can even say that word. We need a uniformity of sound. We need uniformity of vowels, consonants, and color. And so that was the primary advice that I gave to this chorus. And I want to make sure that they never sacrifice quality of sound for volume.
Excellent. The writing for the chorus in this, there's a lot of choral kind of moments where they're in parts and singing pretty tonal music. And then there are things that are not like that. How did you employ different strategies, or how are you employing different strategies, I should say, with the chorus to achieve the effects that are needed for the piece?
Yes. So as I mentioned earlier, the chorus really has to get used to what they're doing before they can be introduced to what the orchestra is doing. So right now in the middle of my chorus rehearsals, I'm focusing on their parts, mostly a cappella, checking pitches, checking rhythms, checking the nuts and bolts of things. And I really want them to get comfortable with their music before and I soon will be doing this actually, in fact, in the next rehearsal or two. I will then start introducing the wild colors of the orchestra. This past summer, I was the chorus director I am the chorus director at the Glimmerglass Festival, and we did mostly an 8-tonal piece by Igor Stravinsky called The Rake's Progress.
Mm-hmm.
And that has a very, very difficult chorus role. And I found what really worked in that was helping the chorus sing their parts, again, a cappella, without the colors of the orchestra to sort of pull them away from what they were doing. Once they got really secure in that, then I started adding the orchestral accompaniment. At that point, they were ready for more depth in their rehearsal anyway, so it helped the process. So that's how I sort of patched together something really, really difficult as The Handmaid's Tale.
Fantastic. Katherine, I want to first of all congratulate you on the production, your first production with us back in December, the double bill, Highways and Valleys, the music of William Grant Still and Kurt Weill. How big a gear shift was it for you and for the singers to sort of now shift to this tonality of this opera?
It's interesting. The opera that we opened the season with, the double bill, lots of tunes, lots of rich harmonies. Every rehearsal was a delight. Not to say that these rehearsals aren't a delight for Handmaid's Tale, but it's a different focus. We try to have fun, but we also have to remember the gravity of the topic. Believe it or not, there are not many harmonies in this chorus. A lot of them are asked to sing unison, maybe in simple harmonies, but in the double bill we just did, oh my gosh, sometimes we were in 6-part, 8-part harmonies. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. So the challenge with Handmaid's Tale is to make sure everyone is singing uniformly, because it is more apparent when you're singing either a cappella or unison music if somebody's off a little bit, or somebody's tone isn't matching, or someone's diction is off a little bit. So those are the challenges for A Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah, I'm often thinking about Gregorian chant sometimes for some reason when the handmaids are singing their familiar tune. I was thinking,
yes,
yeah, very interesting.
Kathy, as we said before, the chorus has quite a big role to play in this opera, in this landscape, in this world of Gilead. What do you hope the audience will experience from the chorus? What do you hope they take away with them from what they see our chorus do on stage?
Whenever I prepare a chorus or wherever I go into the opera house, all I really want is for someone to be able to pay attention and somehow get into the story and perhaps even be changed by what they have seen and what they have heard. I otherwise don't go in thinking, oh, I want this to happen, that to happen, other than good singing and good musicianship. But what I would want our audience to take away from this is just be a part of the story, get into it, focus into it, and perhaps have an appreciation for all of the talent that's happening, not only on stage, but in the pit, backstage, everywhere in the theater. It's a huge, huge thing to put opera together. It takes hundreds of people. And I would hope that an audience member would also have an appreciation for how many people it takes just to create this one evening in the theater.
Katherine, I had a question. I was talking to one of the choristers, and they said that you often do some of the rehearsals yourself at the pianos. Just kind of wondering, what is your prep, even before you get to the rehearsal with them, what has happened for you to be ready to sort of direct them?
Yes. So as I am a pianist, I've spent my life playing for singers, playing for choruses. And, as I evolved as a chorus director, I found out that in those initial rehearsals, it was more efficient for me to be at the piano rather than having an assistant at the piano. While we have wonderful pianists here at Detroit Opera, and I've worked with wonderful pianists at all the different companies I've worked at, anybody who knows me knows the name of the game for Kathy is efficiency. And so I like to be at the piano myself. I like to, I feel like the rehearsal goes more quickly if I'm just at the piano and able to play things that I hear, or if I need to make corrections or I need to assist people. So, when I'm studying the score, I'm at the piano myself, for weeks. I'm listening to recording. Yes, I am listening for orchestra, but really the way I learn a score is just I'm on the piano bench, I'm in front of a piano, and I'm just playing through things and discovering things myself. In that manner, I feel like I can be a more effective chorus director for our singers.
Kathy, what can you teach us about the musical style of Paul Rutter's The Handmaid's Tale?
Yes. So The Handmaid's Tale is a really disturbing story. And as such, it is told in free tonal style. So dissonances, heavy orchestration, and shrill outpourings of emotion are juxtaposed with familiar religious tunes and heartbreaking moments of vulnerability, making the score an intense roller coaster ride. It utilizes a complex and eclectic blend of modern atonalism and minimalism, interwoven with surprising elements like hymn tunes, jazz riffs, and gospel music. And again, this creates a dissonant yet sometimes lyrical soundscape.
Well, Katherine Kozak, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us a little glimpse into what goes on behind the scenes, particularly with the chorus and what you're doing with them. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Arthur, and thank you, Nathalie. It was a pleasure.
And Nathalie Doucet, thank you once again for joining me. We are becoming quite the team.
Thank you for having me, Arthur. I always love to talk about opera with you. And for everyone listening to our glimpse into the Detroit Opera's production of The Handmaid's Tale, we hope to see you for this moving production, which opens March 1st and runs through March 7th at the Detroit Opera House.
To purchase tickets to The Handmaid's Tale or find more information about the production, visit our website at detroitopera.org. You can also connect with us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and X. But please thank Jake Neer for his assistance in producing these podcasts, and we'll see you at the opera.